for a brief period and disappear. Even when important laws are enacted, bills are passed, they don't actually show any seriousness. One example I would like to quote on this in this regard, which is again supplied by C.V. Madhukar. He says, when the contempt of court's amendment bill was passed in the Lok Sabha, there were only 21 members on the treasury benches and 9 members in the opposition camp. So only 30 MPs passed this important bill. What other business these legislators have when the session is going on and important discussion is taking place? If they cannot show seriousness, if they don't realize their responsibility, you can just imagine, say, whether we have to call this parliament, these houses as the primordial bodies or not. Which is that is it. Then most of the times, they waste most of the time in fighting with each other on flimsy matters, not on any serious matters. The situation became so worse in Bihar. They did not have time to carry on their usual normal legislative business. They would fight with each other. As a result, important laws had to be enacted. Since laws were not enacted because of the unruly behavior of the legislators, large number of ordinances were passed, and whenever sessions were convened, they would fight with each other, and ordinances which had been lapsed would be re-promulgated. As Santosh Hegde said, some of the ordinances were in operation for nearly 14 years, and as I cited in my paper, in that case, DC Wadhwa case, Supreme Court held this re-promulgation of an already lapsed ordinance as a fraud on the Constitution. The job of the President is not to make the law. It is the Parliament which should make law. And Parliament fails to make the law, then President issues the ordinance. It can be in operation only for 16 weeks. And plus 6 months if there is a intervening period of 6 months between two sessions. At the most, 7.5 months, the ordinance can be in operation, and that means was employed to have laws in Bihar. So legislators are elected to act as legislators, but they had forgotten their main job. So everywhere there is a fall in the quality in the legislative houses. And one of the factors is the entry of a large number of persons with a criminal background. Here, ORA committee has made some, study. It states that the nexus between, I quote, the nexus between crime syndicates and political personalities was very deep. All over India, criminal syndicates have become a law unto themselves. Mafia network is virtually running a parallel government, pushing the state operators into irrelevance. Large number of these leaders have found their way into legislative bodies. And in this regard, one suggestion I have made is that amendment of Section 8, subsection 4 of the Representation of the People Act of 1951, under which, we should provide that when a charge is framed by a court against, a sitting member, he should be immediately disqualified. Or if a candidate is charged with an offence under this provision, then he should be disqualified from contesting. But now we don't have that provision. So it is high time that Section 8.4 of the Act of 1951 should be amended so that persons having dubious character against whom charges are framed by a court of law can be prevented from entering into the political process. In this regard, I would like to cite one small recommendation made by this commission appointed to review the Constitution Review Commission. The commission had recommended that a political party that nominates a person with criminal antecedents to be its candidates must be de-recognized. But who has to lay down this rule? It is again through a law enacted by the parliament. And I think it would be asking too much from the legislators to be so generous to tie their own hands. So it might not happen. Then another thing is the 10th schedule, which we have inserted in the constitution, wherein now we have inserted the anti-defection provisions into the constitution. 10th schedule inter alia provides that if a member of the legislature, either parliament or the state legislature, votes or abstains contrary to the whip given by the political party of which he is the member, he will be disqualified. That means no member of the parliament has any right to dissent from the whip, the direction given by the political parties. Actually, this provision stifles the independence of the members. The members cannot express freely their views. These members have been granted so many privileges, so many rights, so that they can act freely, express their views freely, participate in the discussion, deliberations freely according to their conscience. But this very provision, which we inserted during Rajiv Gandhi's time, stifles the initiative to act independently. It is high time that we should amend this provision also. That is the 10th schedule to the Constitution. And in my paper, I have quoted how in other democracies, including UK, a member of the parliament can dissent from the directions given by the political party. When Tony Blair wanted the parliament to endorse his, decision to support or to fight against Saddam, 120 MPs belonging to the ruling Labour Party opposed. Can you imagine such a situation in India? It can never happen in India. That's why what I have suggested here is that if the government of the day is not facing any vote of confidence, where its existence is not at stake, all members should forget the party lines and participate in the discussion and debate freely and without any predilections of their political party, so that the country would be benefited by their collective wisdom. And another aspect which I have highlighted is the legislators, occupying offices of profit. We all know under Article 102, 1A of the Constitution, if any person is holding any office of profit under government, he will be disqualified. Even if he is holding he is a member, he will be disqualified. And if he is already holding, he cannot contest the election. Holding office of profit operates as a disqualification. But Parliament has been given power to exempt certain officers and declare them as not officers of profit for the purpose of Article 102. And very recently you have seen, some 40 to 45 MPs would have been disqualified under this provision. And in order to save their, position, Constitution, the Act was amended. Act was amended, and more number of officers were brought under the purview of this Act, the Parliament Prevention of Disqualification Act of 1959. According to me, this power given to the Parliament to exempt officers from declared as officers of profit for the purpose of Article 102 should be removed. And legislators should not hold any office. Their main business is only to make law, to function as legislators. They should not occupy any office, either as a chairman of a board, chairman of a corporation, nothing. Their main business is only to act as legislators. So I don't know how far we can accept the suggestion made by Sri B.K. Nehru, which I have quoted in my paper. Let me quote this. Legislators shall have absolutely no privileges or perquisites. They shall get a salary and nothing else. They shall not be given any post whatsoever by the executive, no membership of any board or chairmanship of any corporation, etc. And Arun Shourie endorses this suggestion of B.K. Nehru, and he says that this way only those who are actually interested in legislation and in policies will seek entry into legislatures. So, to sum up, the legislators should not be, they are given so much, privileges, immunities, and if they are to be worthy of these privileges and immunities, they must behave responsibly and to drive into them this responsibility. The voters have to become responsible, more responsible. The public must take interest in the political process so that it can act as a restraint on the waywardness of the legislators. At least by this we can probably uplift our democratic setup from the cesspool in which it is found now. With these few ideas, I conclude. Thank you.
To address the gathering.
Respected Chairman, G. Dakshinamurthy, Professor Rajsekhar, Professor Putina, my dear colleagues and students. The topic, strengthening of democratization of lawmaking process. It is believed that India has a fairly stable democratic structure. In spite of that, it requires strengthening. So then, what afflicts the democratic process, particularly the lawmaking process? In fact, there are several factors, and the primary one, because my paper again, role of individual legislators in lawmaking process, naturally I concentrate on the quality of and the integrity, etc. of the persons who become legislators. It is often said that greatest threat to the liberty and good governance in this country comes from the legislators. And these legislatures consist of persons who have no inclination to make law or evaluate policies. To quote, persons try to enter legislatures not because they have any particular competence for legislation or for assisting policies or even any special interest in this. Among the reasons for which they do so are that entering the legislature is the stepping stone to becoming a minister. Entering the legislature can help shield one from the law. Doing so confers several benefits: salaries, allowances, fees, attending sessions, fees for attending sessions, committee meetings, free accommodation, free telephone services, free travel subsidies, and etc., and all the way to lifelong pensions. In addition, as these recent disclosures have shown, there are co-curricular windfalls from voting for or against a government. Recall JMM bribery cases. And to what may be skimmed from MP local area development schemes and to what may be charged for asking questions. So then, this is the, in fact, that the sums up the present conditions of the legislatures and why these things are happening, and I have taken up 5 issues relating to this state of affairs in Indian democracy. Firstly, there is no structure that cannot be perverted, and the democratic structure often allows those who do not believe in democracy to operate the system. Secondly, the democratic process during the first 50 years paved way for the emergence of certain wrong notions like people are sovereign, and in the name of sovereign people, anything and everything can be done and one can get away with it. Thirdly, the entry of criminals into electoral process, which has been sufficiently dealt by Professor Rajsekhar. Fourthly, electoral process is not accessible to statesmen who can operate the system in a better manner. And lastly, there is lack of academic evaluation of the political process to highlight deficiencies impartially. First, democratic structure. In fact, every democracy is threatened by those who do not believe in democratic principles and values. Today, Indian democracy is not so much threatened by any usurper from a distant capital, but from the neighborhood gangster. So the history is replete with such examples wherein, those who democratically elected will through the democratic system and then became dictators. Of course, even the Napoleon is not an exception. Hitler is not an exception. So they all acquired power through democratic process, but then they never followed the democratic principles and became dictators. Secondly, there are wrong notions. So then, the Indian democracy we often hear of here the slogans like the people are sovereign and the, these slogans come from basically from the people belonging to political class. At one point, I think you must have read about the Hitler's example. In 1937, Hitler ordered 67 members of his party to be killed in the very Nazi party meeting itself, because those 67 persons opposed Hitler's war propaganda. And next day he declared that at that particular point of time, he was acting as Chief Justice of German people. So that it is not the murders, but judicial executions. Of course, in the similar such acts, of course, in lesser in degree, often justified in the name of sovereign people. So then, many such acts, though lesser in degree, are often justified in the name of sovereign people, the extension of the notion. So the legislator is a representative of the people. Then the people are sovereign, therefore parliament is sovereign, therefore parliamentarians are sovereign, and therefore the one who controls majority of the parliament is sovereign. So the like that, in fact, such notions are the staple of politicians, and in fact, that many undemocratic decisions. So the self-serving decisions are often justified in the name of sovereign people. So then how to get away with these wrong notions that are developed in Indian democracy since 60 years? So the next issue is concerning criminalization of politics. Of course, so many aspects of this issue has been discussed, when in fact, that the very Constitution Review Committee, quoting NN Vora Committee report, said that there is a strong nexus between political personalities, criminals, etc. And then this Vora Committee report was given in 1993. But until that Tandoor murder, no action has been taken. And in Parliament, somebody raised a question. And then only a summary of the report, about some 40 pages, were placed before the Parliament. And not the entire report was placed before the Parliament. Even today, nobody knows. In fact, it consists of several reports by the CBI, then Central Intelligence Agency, so that depicting the connection between criminals and politicians, administration, etc. And therefore, in fact, according to one observer, so the Vora Committee had reported in 1993, nothing happened until Tandoor murder, but thereafter only a summary of the report was presented before the Parliament. It was meaningless and Edmund Burke once said that the basic purposes of elections is to, in fact, elect representatives whose personal qualities best fit into them for the functions of the government. Strong and stable government and a healthy democratic polity which promote national integration and social cohesion. So in fact, our electoral process in fact fragments the electorate. So as in fact, that so where there are more number of candidates in the election fray, there is more scope for fragmenting the electorate, and so that with a small percentage of votes, so this has actually increased rigging, and in fact the very system, first past the post, we have followed since independence. In fact, it was thought that first past the post will give a, in fact, viable government, so the very, wherein the people truly representing the electorate will be elected and the competent, but in fact, that Indian experience was different. In fact, in one of my earlier papers published, I suggested, in fact, it is better to have proportional representation through list system, so that the differences of caste, creed, so many other things cannot be exploited during elections. Anyhow, so then last issue is concerning academic evaluation of political process. In fact, in India, we have a very less study, even from British Raj. So the academicians are not actively participating in evaluating political processes. So in fact, of course, sometimes somewhere, in fact, during elections, so some study will be conducted. Only, in fact, the studies are not serious. In fact, some projects will be taken up by our political science department. Sometimes, that contribution of Devaraj Arasu, Gundu Rao, etc. So in fact, the political, their functioning, the election, all these things, in fact, that they are not properly evaluated. Maybe because of the reason that, most of our academicians depend upon state patronage or some other reasons. We have, in fact, even in university systems, the universities are losing autonomy, whereas Woodrow Wilson, once claimed that why America is number one state in the world, it is because of two things. One is independent judiciary and another one is independent universities. So in India, both are lacking. In fact, that, both are not independent. So then, in fact, that, these seminars and other things,